When an NBA team wins the championship, it's typical of them to call themselves world champions, despite the teams being largely based in the US, with the first Canadian champion only coming this year. While the NBA does pride itself on having a worldwide audience, this is still American teams flaunting themselves as world champions despite other teams existing worldwide. However, starting in 1987, the NBA would get its chance to once and for all prove its superiority amongst other basketball leagues in the world in a thing called the McDonald's Championship, or the McDonald's Open, or McDonald's Challenge. There wasn't really one set name, but the important thing is that it's McDonald's. The McDonald's Championship, as I'll call it, it was a round-robin tournament featuring an NBA team, a EuroLeague champion, and another international team from around the world. When it first started in 1987, it was decided that instead of the NBA sending its champion to compete in the tournament, David Stern would handpick the team. The first representative for the NBA was the Milwaukee Bucks, as the first championship was being held in Milwaukee. Tracer Milano was sent from Italy to represent EuroLeague in the event, but that alone wouldn't cause enough interest. They needed a big third team, and in the 80s, who in the world was bigger than the Soviet Union? The Soviets had faced American competition before, most notably in the 1972 Olympic final, which is widely considered to be one of the worst refereed games of all time. The Soviets had never faced American professional competition before, facing off only against college or amateur teams, so this was a pretty big deal. And with the countries still in the midst of a Cold War, there's nationalism and pride on the line as well. Bucks forward Terry Cummings said, "I'm representing my team, my league, and my family by playing in this game." Tracer Milano guard Mike D'Antoni even chimed in on the match with his thoughts, saying, "I'm American, and I hope these boys give them a nice whipping." The Soviets were led by Alexander Volkov and Sharunas Marciulionis, who had both been drafted by NBA teams. But the big cheese, however, for the Soviets was Arvydas Sabonis, a 7'3" center who could shoot. Noted basketball scholar Bill Walton called him a 7'3" Larry Bird. He had been drafted twice in the NBA, first by the Hawks, but the pick was voided as he was not 21 yet, but the Blazers scooped him up the next year. He was a talent unlike anybody else in the world. But he couldn't stay healthy in time for the challenge, so he would be out for the Soviets as they would go on to face the Bucks. Still, the Soviets were confident in their abilities to take on an NBA team. They even thrashed Tracer Milano by a greater margin than what the Bucks did, as Tracer's zone defense proved to be a bit of a challenge for the Bucks late. Despite losing by 15, the loss was seen as a huge victory for Tracer Milano in Europe. Didier Lecourrier, who wrote for a French basketball publication called Maxi Basket, said that tomorrow morning, when people pick up the paper in Paris, they will simply not believe it. This is a real important date in European basketball history. And despite the world-class Sabonis being out for the Soviet Union, Milwaukee was shorthanded too, as Sidney Moncrief was out with a leg injury, and Craig Hodges and John Lucas were both planning to leave the Bucks in free agency, so they didn't want to play in this exhibition tournament. And when the ball finally tipped off, it was clear that the Soviets were no match for the Milwaukee Bucks, as the Bucks played with what Sports Illustrated's Jack McCollum described as a fervor not seen in the preseason, and had their starters unleash an onslaught that would have the most rabid red baiter wish that Coach Del Harris had gone to his bench earlier. The Bucks were up 98-50 at one point in the game and coasted to a 127-100 victory, winning the inaugural McDonald's Championship. David Stern considered this a success and brought it back around next year, this time with the tournament taking place in Spain. He sent the Celtics internationally, as he considered them to be the best-known franchise in the NBA at that point. And the Celtics were less than pleased about that. While they tore through all their competition, despite Real Madrid's Drazen Petrovic balling out against them, they weren't entirely happy with their team getting sent overseas shortly before the season for what they would consider a lose-lose situation, as if you win the game, that's what you're expected to do, and if you lose, you'd be a huge embarrassment forever. Some Celtics fans even blame the longer preseason for helping flare up Larry Bird's ankle injury again. Youch. But the European fans loved it, as they got the chance to see their favorite NBA players live for the first time. A player from another team froze in the presence of Danny Ainge, not believing that he was in the same building as a man he watched play on TV. When the Celtics received the trophy for winning, it came from none other than the Prince of Spain himself. And Larry Bird had to go up to the second row in the stands to get it, because as he put it, the prince does not go down, Bird goes up. So the tournament had a successful first 2 years, but it couldn't continue that trend in 1989, where the only notable thing about that tournament was that it was the first time the Nuggets have actually won anything. The tournament remained popular with European fans, with them finally getting the chance to see their favorite players live. And NBA fans' only concerns stateside were that no NBA team would lose and damage the integrity of a league. But if there was one NBA team who would be a huge embarrassment to the league, especially on an international scale, then it would be the New York Knicks. In 1990, the Knicks were the representative in the championship, and they faced Scavallini-Pesaro in the semifinal. And they could not hit water if they fell out of a boat that night, shooting only 44%. The only thing that kept them in the game was that Scavallini-Pesaro was shooting just as bad, going 42% from the floor. But due to some clutch shots, including one that inspired one of my favorite basketball calls of all time,
Chioso, ci prova Darwin, bomba!
Seriously, I do not know who the announcer is. I don't even know if he's still alive today, but we need to get this guy on the biggest television markets possible because I love him. So, thanks to those clutch shots, Pescaro is leading against one of the top NBA teams with 8 seconds to go by 3 points. They got huge scoring contributions from 2 guys who spent a combined 10 years in the NBA, and a guy named Magnifico, who I can only assume started doing children's birthday parties as a magician after the championship was over. The Knicks, in their last chance to tie the game, decided to loft up a rainbow three with a 30% career 3-point shooter, Gerald Wilkins. Normally in basketball, this would be a terrible move, especially late in the game, but it falls. And the Knicks get temporary salvage from their embarrassment, as in overtime, Patrick Ewing realized, hey, I'm Patrick Ewing, and he took over the game, allowing the Knicks to win and beat Pop 87 Split in the championship game, making them the 1990 McDonald's champions. And surely, the NBA's next representative would not embarrass them in the same way, as they were sending the Los Angeles Lakers. And Magic Johnson embarrassing himself in front of the whole league? That would never happen. And here we are, 22 seconds left, and Spain's Joventut Badalona has the ball with a chance to tie. And they lose it out of bounds despite James Worthy probably touching it right in front of the only ref in the game who worked for the NBA, and the Lakers would go on to win by 2, with the opposing coach saying that the refs were feeling a little patriotic that night. But regardless of the outcome, the world was catching up, so surely that would lead to several more entertaining games in the future, right? Well, no. The tournament switched to a biannual format the following year, and the NBA never let a game get that close again. Though I'm surprised that the Suns pulled it out in '93, because I'd imagine it was really hard to get Charles Barkley to focus when he was playing a team with both beer and bologna in the name. The talent gap was just too big, and part of that came from EuroLeague players starting to compete in the NBA, such as Drazen Petrovic or Vidas Sabonis. and Tony Kukoc, who was on the Chicago Bulls team that won the 1997 McDonald's championship, despite not having Pippen or Rodman play in the tournament. And if you want to see Michael Jordan just destroying some fools while salsa music plays in the background, do yourself a favor and check out this highlight video of his performance in the final. I'll link it in the description because you need to do yourself a favor and check it out. The tournament was discontinued after 1999, and I think the NBA got what they wanted out of it. International fans loved it, and it showed that while their teams weren't of the same caliber, there were still players from their teams that could compete in the NBA. And it helped grow the game globally. And now, almost every NBA roster has a few European or foreign players on it. And based on Team USA's recent performances in exhibition games, the talent gap between America and the rest of the world in basketball, it's shrinking. So while the NBA is still the most dominant basketball league in the world, even though if more European players take the Mirotic route, we might be able to see the talent gap shrink in the future. So it's cool to look back on a place where that sort of all started. A place where the NBA proved itself as the best basketball league in the world. A place called McDonald's.
Fishy, fishy. Fish, fish, McKites, McKites. Fish, fish, McKites, McKites. Fish, fish, McKites.